All right, ladies, thank you so much. Firstly, I've already mentioned it, but you guys were on my radar really early on when I wanted to start the podcast. So I'm very happy to have you guys, very excited for our conversation. Thank you very much for taking your time to join me today.
Oh, thanks for having us, Bobby. We're very excited to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk about your book, The Pocket Guide to Remote Facilitation, or the Remote Facilitator's Pocket Guide, which you guys just recently released. And I must say, I kind of want to throw it in there, like, did you know it was coming? Because you released that just before lockdowns, but we'll touch on that later. But just to give us a start, can you guys tell us about Kirsten and tell us about Jay? Jay, do you want to go first?
Sure. I started my, my career in Agile a couple of years ago. But it was actually when I started with Kirsten that we started exploring remote facilitation as a thing. And that we started, I think it was about 3 years ago. And we've been working together ever since, trying to find the best ways of facilitating remotely. And up until recently, I'm working as a remote Agile coach at a company called IO. So I work for a company that's based in Germany, all the way in South Africa, fully remote. So that's quite exciting.
That's very cool. I think a lot of people's dream to do something like that.
It's funny you mentioned that. This is a slight tangent, but I also remember when Jay and I first met, we were volunteering on the SUGSA committee. And that was about 4 or 5, maybe 6 years now, I don't know, ago. And there was someone there working remotely for an American company. And everyone on the committee felt so sorry for her because it was a case of, oh, shame, you have to work remotely. It's such a hard thing. And how can teams be truly collaborative remotely? And then it slowly started changing to now it's the norm. So, yeah, now it's just funny to hear you say you're so lucky because I remember a time it wasn't the case.
Yeah. So, Kirsten, do you want to tell us about your background in general and into Agile?
So I studied actually clinical and neuropsychology. I had no intention of ending up in software. And then through a curvy path, found my way here. My intro into Agile was working for a very big corporate, like 6,000 plus people. And I was put on a project that was in its 4th year of failing as like a baby project manager. And then an Agile coach came and she brought our team together and I remember watching her and thinking, this is so awesome. Whatever she's doing here clearly is shining a light in an organization where there isn't much of it. And so that was how I came to Agile. And then I worked within that space for a while. And as Jay mentioned, then we met up. And I'm also now working at IO as a remote Agile coach. And it's the best.
Nice. It's very confusing, guys, because I work for a company called IO.
What?
Yeah, but it's spelled it's literally just the letters I and O. So IO and yours is IO. Very confusing.
Kind of cool though.
So ladies, as we know, in South Africa, it's Women's Month. And I just thought, when the stars aligned and today happened, I thought, what a great way to kind of just bring up the subject of women in Agile. And so you guys have kind of already spoken about your meeting. It's just fantastic to see you guys doing this book and your conferences and the talks and everything like that. So you said you met during the SUGSA being in the committee together. When did the spark happen that you were like, guys, we've got a good idea here. Let's write a book. Like, how did that happen? and how did it sort of become into fruition?
I guess I can start and Jay just jump in.
Go for it.
So we started speaking at conferences quite a while ago because we were working with remote teams and we weren't finding a lot of content on how to help that human aspect of it. Like there's lots of high level inspiring talks, but nothing practical. So then we started just speaking about what we were doing. And each time we spoke, people would stay behind and be like, what? That's amazing. Like asking for more information. And we were thinking, this really doesn't feel that revolutionary, but clearly it's helping people. And then one day, Esther Derby happened to be in one of our talks. And for anyone who doesn't know her, she's like a legend in the Agile community. If you want to talk about women in Agile, she's one of our heroes.
She comes up in the book quite a lot.
Yes, she's been actually like our fairy godmother in many ways. Definitely a case for how women can help women. But yeah, so Jay, I don't know, maybe you want to pick up the story from there? She came to one of our talks.
So she came to one of our first, actually she came to our very first our second workshop at the Scrum gathering. And we both, when we saw her in the front, we were like, oh my goodness, Esther Derby is in our workshop. But afterwards, she came to us and she was like, oh, that's really great. There was so much useful content, like, thank you so much. And she gave us also some really good constructive feedback. And then a couple of months later, out of nowhere, we got this email from Esther linking us to a publisher saying, I think these ladies have a good idea for a book, get in touch, and kind of the rest happened from there.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
If anything, when she sent that email, Jay, and I kind of chuckled, and then there's this long submission process you have to do, and like literally pages and pages and pages, and we did it just for the experience. We thought there was no ways the book would get accepted. It's a big publishing house in California, right? So we thought there was just no chance. The day it came back and we got accepted, we were like, oh no.
Okay, now we actually have to do this.
Yeah. Exactly.
Actually, we should thank like the tester community for giving us like some sort of inspiration, because I was wrong. It was not the second time, it was the third time we had done that workshop. And at the Let's Test conference, we had 2 people come to us saying this should be a book. And I think at that moment, Kirsten and I were like, haha, that's very funny, like whenever. So we also have to thank them for planting that seed that all of this was possible, for sure.
Did you give them the book to read as a tester?
Yikes.
Make joke.
Actually, one did. Louise got a book.
Oh, yeah?
She's one of our recommendations on the back.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And so in terms of women in Agile, I mean, my experience anyways is that it's a very male-dominated industry. Obviously, a lot of the software engineers are male. How do you find being a female has sort of affected your journey in Agile? Has it been good, positive? Just a general, feedback on that for other women that are looking to come into the industry. Jay?
To be honest, I was quite lucky. The first time I transitioned to a Scrum Master, I had a woman mentor who was really amazing, taught me everything I knew. And then immediately after that job, I moved to a company where I had a senior Agile coach, and he was quite supportive, and he still is to this day. He was quite supportive in terms of my career and helping me navigate the space. So he would give me tips on how to engage with the work environment, even so far as giving me like salary negotiation tips, which is super important for women, I think.
Absolutely.
So he was super great. And I think it's actually been 5 years now and we still communicate. But that's not to say that I didn't have negative experiences. I've obviously been in spaces where I haven't had that great experiences, but I think having good role models and good support systems can help you navigate those spaces. So that's definitely been my experience. Super lucky. I know not everyone has that.
Yeah.
Kirsten, I know you guys have been talking a lot about having mentors, and your experience on having female mentors in the industry.
Yeah, I think like Jay, I feel super lucky. And I think also whenever you find yourself feeling super lucky, it's an opportunity for you to pass that on. So if I look at the pattern in my life, it's been a case of like that first job I mentioned, that Agile coach, she became my mentor, and she also kind of modeled for me what it was like to be yourself in a male-dominated environment, because it was very corporate. I remember sitting at like boardroom tables where it was just all men around the table, all senior men, and her voice is very clearly not heard. But she still modeled that authenticity and being herself. And then when I left there, I had another mentor, Cara Turner, who you may know. She was my mentor.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think we're super lucky in the Agile community to have some really amazing women, and the kind of culture is one that everyone wants to help those around them grow. So I wouldn't be where I am without those people. I'd have made way more mistakes, even though I have still made lots. I would have made way more. And then the pattern just kind of follows. So I was coached, and then I was mentoring people at my last job, and some of them have stuck around, and I'm still mentoring someone in Kenya and another lady who's now on the SUGSA committee. So it's like the circle of life, sort of.
No, it's great. And I think that just speaks to being, a coach and, in the Agile space. It's just that mentorship. It's priceless. You can't put a price on it.
No.
And to have someone guide you through it is also amazing. So how many years or in general have you guys been doing this for?
The remote facilitation stuff, or just Agile stuff in general?
I think Agile in general, yeah. And you can bring it to the remote stuff.
Yeah. Jay, have you done maths quicker than me?
2013 for me is when I started the journey, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, because I only got exposed to Agile and Scrum Master in early 2017, I think it was. And I was just like, Scrum Master? I've heard of it. My mentor, he was like, I think you would suit being a Scrum Master. And I was like, okay, cool. Let me go check it out. Boom. Oh, look at that. Look at all wonderful, wild and wonderful things out here. So,
it's definitely not something you would come across in varsity or school. I think it's the kind of job your parents could never advise you to move into, because they still don't even actually understand what we're doing. So you can only kind of bump your head on it by accident.
I'm so happy that you brought that up, because now I'm going to bring it to the book. And I think it's time we start unpacking the book, because I did the Audible thing. I got it on Audible. And I was driving recently listening to it. And the first thing that popped into my head in the beginning parts of the book was, if there was a curriculum for being a Scrum Master or a facilitator, this book needs to be in there. No, absolutely. I mean, I think I'm also very lucky. Again, we speak about the community, and you guys have done a number of events and coaching circles and talks for the community. So I got exposure to some of your cool little tips and tricks. And I didn't realize it until the book came. I was like, wow, I mean, this is obviously how you guys have developed it. And the more it came out, I was like, but this is just how it needs to be. People need to be taught this. Like if someone goes to get accredited, make sure they have this book.
If I could just add that, it's funny that you mentioned it. I was having this conversation the other day with someone where I think a lot of Scrum Master training or Agile training falls short sometimes, because even though the Agile Manifesto says people and interactions over process and tools, a lot of the training we receive is around frameworks and tools. And
absolutely.
I really think that whether it's coaching training or facilitation training, we need training that helps us in that people and interaction space. And that's really like fuzzy area. But I
completely agree. I mean, if I think 2 days, because that's generally what the course is, it's 2 days to go get your certification. We don't really touch on the inside bits, the stuff that you speak about in the book. And I don't want to give it away because people need to go and read it, but go buy the book. And
thank you.
Yeah. but all the little tips and tricks, you don't learn that. And you're not going to, like, when I bring some of those things to my work, everyone's like, oh, wow, like, where did you learn this? And it's phenomenal and it's enjoyable. And it's one of your principles is make it fun, right? So we'll get into that. Again, so going back to what I said originally, did you guys know what was coming?
So, earlier Kirsten mentioned that writing the book and the whole process took a long amount of time. I don't think we could have ever imagined Corona happening about almost 2 years ago, which is when we started. So the answer is definitely not. we've been working on the book for like, I think it's almost 2 years now. It was a year and a half when we actually submitted the final draft.
Sure.
So no.
No.
Okay.
And if anything, I think there was a part of us that was a little bit doubtful if it would even have a big enough audience reach, because I remember speaking to some very senior Agile coaches and having a debate. This was probably end of last year, so not that long ago. And this person was debating quite strongly that a non-co-located team would never actually reach the same degrees of engagement or productivity remotely. And this is like someone very well respected. And I was so surprised that those views still existed. And then obviously to your question, you kind of wonder, oh, well, the book, maybe some people will find it relevant.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
no, I mean, it came out, when did it release? Released in like June, I think it was, when I started seeing you guys post about it.
Yeah.
And at that point, I think everyone realized, okay, this thing is real. We're going to be working remote and we've got to figure it out.
Yeah.
And your book came out, and that's why I was like, starting a podcast, I need to get them on ASAP. So obviously you didn't see it coming on, but you saw a trend. You speak of trends in the book. How do you see that trend as work now, and how do you see it going further from now?
Yeah.
Kirsten?
So the trend that we were noticing before, like we started writing the book, was that remote working was increasing, but most of the literature is around the benefits. And if you looked at research that was showing the challenges, people weren't speaking enough about that. And there are some genuine challenges with remote working, specifically along the human aspects and anything collaboration wise. That's a very impacted space. So that was kind of pre-COVID. And then now obviously you've gone fully remote. The pendulum swung this way. And I think I was speaking to like a head of HR today for a company. They went remote overnight, and now they're trying to navigate what this space is going to be, and they're doing a hybrid. And I'm curious to see what happens, because I see a lot of companies going, okay, cool, we never thought we could be remote. Now we can, but we want to go back to half. And I don't know, this is just like floating around in my head. I'm wondering if companies are kind of going to miss the mark on both for a while, because you can't fully optimize for either when you choose these hybrid approaches. You kind of accidentally exclude all your remote people. You can't fully leverage the power of being co-located. So I suspect maybe there'll be a couple years of weird hybridness. And then maybe almost like, your hipster movements that have like returned us to organic stuff. Maybe there's going to be a bit of a return to like co-located, we love being together, and then more polarized remote. That's something I suspect. I don't know.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because in my company, we actually have some people working. We're based in Cape Town, but we've got some people working in Joburg, Pretoria. We've even got some people now from George. And in my team, I had a guy from Pretoria, and he's actually said when we went into remote, he's loving it because now everyone is remote, and he actually feels more connected to the team than ever before. So that's great. Jay, how do you also feel about this hybrid and dealing with having the potential of having some of your team remote and some not, or trying to get this hybrid right?
That's an interesting question. I do think Kirsten is right. I think that companies are going to try and do hybrid after lockdown first. But actually, one or two teams at my current company are hybrid at the moment. And this just because some people prefer the office and some people prefer being remote. And one of the sort of principles we speak about in the book is creating equal opportunity. And practically what that means is even if you have a hybrid team, making sure that everybody has the same experience. So for example, even if we go back and half my team is in the office, trying to get everybody to dial on their own machine, as an example, so that everybody can experience the meeting in the same way. Making sure that interactions are not people sitting in a room having a conversation while 2 or 3 people are remote. It's just those little things to think about when you're approaching a hybrid situation. Just being aware of that can help your remote meetings.
Well, there you go. And I think that speaks to being the facilitator in all of this. And I love in your book the analogy of the gaatjie. Am I saying it right?
I said it wrong for ages, and then Jay kindly corrected me one day, so she can pronounce it better.
It's technically gaatjie, but it's all
Well,
good.
gaatjie.
Yeah.
There you go.
No, but I love the analogy because it fits it so well. And I see you guys actually keep using the driving on the road as a way to explain the facilitator in the role. And I really do feel that, and I spoke to, I think, Bevan on the first episode, just how everyone kind of moved, Scrum Masters were one of the first roles that got cut off. When people were doing these cuts and trying to figure out what to do. And I've always felt like, no, your Scrum Masters are actually that much more important now because they're the ones that need to facilitate all of these things happening. So I don't know how to say it, but you guys, you hit it on the mark on that one. And I love the analogy of the gaatjie. Just facilitating what happens in the car while the car's still driving, and then just making sure that they abide by the road rules. Who came up with that? How did that whole analogy start? I'm guessing it's on Jay's side.
Kirsten actually came up with that cool analogy. So I pronounce it, Kirsten came up with it.
I came up with it and I was like, what's the word, that person? Then I Googled it and I said it wrong for months. But go for it.
No, I wanted to ask, so how do you feel about that whole situation, about the role of a facilitator now more than ever?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because I think in remote spaces, a lot of what we lose is all the accidental stuff which we don't value because it happens accidentally. There's just so much that we can rely on coincidentally. Jay often speaks about, like, you walk past someone, you see their shoes and you're like, cool shoes, and now we're friends. And that's just a silly example, but that kind of stuff's really important for sparking stuff in an organization. And none of that happens by accident, both outside meetings and within meetings. And within the meetings, they become just 10 times harder. They really do. Like, researchers prove that, and we're seeing it now. So I guess the way that we think about it now is, I almost think there's going to be a new role kind of emerging. I saw Quora was advertising for a head of remote, but someone who's kind of paying attention to weaving these spaces together is going to be quite important.
That's interesting because that ties in with my question that I've always wondered about. So I've played why product master became a thing. I've explained this already, is that I've never been just a Scrum Master or just a product owner, and trying to do both. And it's so difficult because you need that Scrum Master to do the facilitation for you. What is your view on having or who do you feel is best suited to be that facilitator? Can it be your product owner? Or should it be a Scrum Master, or like now a head of remote, as you've said? Jay, what are your thoughts?
So it's interesting. So I think my answer is going to say it depends. And so, for example, one of my teams, when I started facilitating in that team, the team members picked up so much of what I was doing, they pretty much have gone and done it themselves. So they've come up with new ideas and new facilitation techniques. I don't work in a product space, so I don't have a product owner. I work with business teams, so account managers, marketing, for example. And so they've just intuitively picked up some of the things that I've shown them, and they've taken it on themselves. So in that space, I don't come in and say like, oh, I'm the facilitator or the agile coach, I have to do this. I give them the space to also grow and learn those skills. But then I have another team, for example, who's a lot more shy. They might pick up some skills, 1 or 2 people, but not everybody on the team is aware of facilitation ways of working. So there, for example, I play a lot bigger role because I still want to take care of the space, take care of the meeting, make sure we get to outcomes. So it really depends. Like, I don't want to say the Scrum Master should always be facilitating, or the product owner should always be facilitating. It just depends.
Do you think it's a misconception that it's a Scrum Master's role to do that?
I think that as a Scrum Master, you want to hold that space, and that is one of your skills. And also, it's great if you can transfer the skills to your team members. Like if you can teach and share and grow your team members to also hold those skills, so that if you're not there, if you've gone on leave, for example, they'll continue to function without you, then that's magic.
If I could just clip onto that, I think it's kind of, for me, the difference between like a core skill and a role. I think facilitation should be a Scrum Master core skill. And to your point earlier, if we don't train on the soft stuff, I believe every Scrum Master that should be like one of their, a T-shaped individual. It should be your eye, it should be your deep skill. But that doesn't mean you always need to perform that role in a team. Ultimately, you're trying to uplift everyone around you and broaden their T's with facilitation, but sometimes you'll find yourself in a context where it's just more lacking and you need to do both the role and skill stuff. So that's kind of how I think about it.
I find it interesting because as a product you need to be able to give you feedback, but if you're facilitating, you need to facilitate the conversation, so you can't get there. So that's just been my personal experience, and why I like having a dedicated facilitator to do all the stuff as you guys speak of in your book.
It's funny also, just to add on, I mean, just before this I came from facilitating a prioritization and planning session with a product owner who hasn't worked with a coach before, and he's quite used to running all his sessions, and we developed a really good relationship, so he's letting me do a little bit more things. And I think it's kind of just outside the realm for product people also to kind of have a deep depth of facilitation activities, because it's like all industries, they all change and there's new stuff all the time. And the exercise we did and the technique we used was one he'd never seen before. And I also don't think you can necessarily expect product owners and managers to stay on top of facilitation as a craft. They should know enough because it's needed, but it's still so deep that it would be hard for them to really specialize in it, I guess.
So I'm going to bring a challenge to you guys that I think most people are probably experiencing. People that have multiple screens and need to be focusing in a meeting, what advice would you give to someone that knows their team are not focused? I know one of your principles is enabling fun learnings. How else would you kind of give, what advice would you give to people that to keep the attention of people, to keep them engaged and to make sure you reach the outcomes of a meeting?
Make everyone force their videos on and keep checking that they all are listening. I'm joking. That's the opposite. That's terrible advice, but I've seen it done. No. So some quick tips would be, don't solve the symptom, like avoid the symptom in the first place by the way you design your session. So avoid sessions that are longer than 45 minutes. And if you do have longer sessions, pause every 15 minutes. And actually, we'll just share our screen with a timer on the screen and tell people to leave their computers. Because the first thing that leads to disengagement is just fatigue. So make sure people don't get fatigued. The second thing is also, I think Zoom and whatever, it's all verbal communication, and that also can be quite a lot more tiring. And especially if you're not a first language English speaker, it's even more tiring. So usually we have quite a lot of silent activities in our virtual calls. So whether it's silent reading just for 5 minutes at the beginning or silent writing portions, but kind of varying that so that you keep people engaged. And it's not like you're doing it to force people not to use other tabs. It's just that there's a natural pull into the session. So breaks, silent stuff, and also give everyone the ability to write for themselves. So don't have one person screen sharing and taking notes. Encourage everyone to jump on and share that responsibility. Those would be such a priceless.
Yeah, I like the last one. Anything else that maybe Kirsten has forgotten, Jay?
I would go back to is the purpose and the outcomes of the meeting properly clarified? So it doesn't happen so much in my space, but I've seen a lot on Twitter of people complaining, I was just in a meeting that could have been an email, or there's so much Zoom meetings happening now that COVID's hit, do we really need all these meetings? So just thinking back to your intention of hosting a meeting in the first place, is it necessary? Or are you just having a meeting because you haven't seen people for a long time and you're needing some sort of control, or you're needing to check up, what's behind that, because that will also determine the engagement and the engagement and the boredom level, I think.
Mm. So how would you, so let's say someone is needing to have a meeting, do you have like some sort of questionnaire? Sounds a bit formal, but like how would someone understand whether this is something that's needed? How would you coach someone away from meetings when not needed? Because it will definitely bring in fatigue if you do them all the time. Do you have any guidelines for people to sort of push back if need be? Kirsten, you look like you were biting at the edges there.
Oh, I don't mind. I was actually trying to see Jay's face if she was going to speak.
Oh, really?
The problem of being a remote facilitator is you're so tuned in. Like, did they mute? Did they unmute?
Oh, gosh. I'm trying to get...
We are studying you. Well, I can go because some things came to mind. So usually if you develop a good enough relationship with, it's usually the product owner or someone in leadership, they will come to you before they set up a meeting probably. And then it's a case of, I use the power statement acronym to just refine their thinking with them. I don't know, you can Google it, but P is for purpose. And then asking them, like, what is the significant impact that this meeting will have? Like, if it goes well, why will it matter? And sometimes already there's drop off there because they realize in articulating it by speaking it through. And the second thing I won't go through it all, is outcomes. So what are the tangible outcomes we're looking for? Are we looking for decisions? And oftentimes as you go through those, you realize, like, for example, if it's just to understand something, it's just so people understand, then it's very easy to say, well, maybe it's easier if we give them something to read before the time. They can understand in that way. Or if it's an analysis task, I heard the other day someone said, meetings only capture people's first reactions, and that's why they hate them, because it just captures people's first reactions. And I thought, that can be true, and if so, that's a problem, because meetings shouldn't. That's a waste of time. So analysis stuff is actually really nicely done asynchronously. You don't need a meeting. You can put up a document and ask people to write on it and whatever. So by asking the meeting owner, what are the outcomes you're looking for and what's the best suited technique to get them and the highest quality thinking is kind of a way you can tease it out.
So would you say the facilitator's role is not purely just in the meetings in that Zoom call? Because I think that's what everyone's actually referring to now. That's my first thought, was it's the facilitation of these Zoom calls. What you're saying, this asynchronous way of dealing with things, that the facilitator, remote facilitator, is more than just that. It's all the background work in setting it up, what you're just saying. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, Jay, do you want to speak to that one? I know you have strong feelings.
Oh, really?
I think that your role as a facilitator can spread in all sections. So besides being prepared for a synchronous meeting, I think that you also need to find other avenues in order for people to communicate. So for example, just today, I myself asked someone, can we have a meeting tomorrow? And then I was like, no, wait, we can actually just talk about this asynchronously. And it similarly like happens with my team. So I asked myself, do we really need a meeting for this? And if not, like, can I facilitate this in another way? As Kirsten mentioned, can we set up a document and have a conversation there first? And just like tease out some of our thoughts before we actually meet. And it's something that I even did with a new team setup, where we were trying to do that, when you do that, like getting to know you as team members, like we think that all of that has to happen synchronously. But for example, I ask people, like, fill out your information beforehand, and then all we need to do is have a quick 30-minute and like share like some of the highlights of what we've read and what we've seen, and talk about some of the things that stood out, instead of going through all the content in the meeting and filling out the information. It can be quite a lot. So
yeah,
I think
it can draw it out quite a bit, and before you know it, and it can sometimes be fun, and you've now gone through, like you said, 30-40 minutes of your meeting time, and you've got 15 minutes to get to the thing, but you didn't want to stop that fun part.
Yeah.
Also, if I could add on to what Jay was saying, there's definitely the piece which is partially, do we need the meeting or not, and other means, and then there's the preparation piece before the meeting. Like our advice is usually however long your meeting is. If it's a co-located meeting, spend that long preparing for it. If it's a remote meeting and you're newish to it, double the time. And then there's the extra piece people forget, which also happens after the meeting. And I think what we're not speaking about here is the note taker or the person that shares actions and follows up on people's actions. That's not what we're speaking about. We're more just speaking about if you as a facilitator are responsible for creating like healthy collaboration and effective outcomes, there's a tail end for you to tie off in a remote space, because when a remote meeting ends, everyone just disappears. And what can you do to make sure there's kind of like a full stop at the end of it, whether it's just making sure links are shared or you put it on somewhere visible. There's also work to be done at the end outside of a meeting.
Yeah, you're so right. I'm guilty of that, definitely. So thank you.
We
and
all
I also
are.
am guilty. Yeah, but I'm even more guilty is literally how I closed off my day today. I contacted one of my devs and said, hey, can we have a meeting at 8 today? I just want to ask you something. I feel so guilty right now. Yes, and there is a ticket that I could have just asked him to look at. But these are vital lists. But this speaks again to those soft skills that your book speaks to. There's all these little nuances that you guys allude to help the facilitator to navigate these times, especially during COVID, and everyone's remote and everyone's trying to figure it out and everyone's getting fatigued. And I guess that actually brings me to the element. I found it was nice to hear your intro, Kirsten. I'm going to guess this was on your side. There was a very science approach to it. I don't know, it sounds like a neurological. You brought a lot of that in the book. Is that from your background? I'm taking it.
Yeah. So Jay humors me a lot because I can go too far down that tunnel and she pulls me out and she's like, you're speaking gibberish that no one understands. So it's been like a really nice balancing. But I personally feel that one of the important skills for a facilitator to have, or at least a skill which will really enhance your facilitation, is some basic, you could call it neural management or cognition theory, but like if you can understand the states that are happening in someone's brain, that's ultimately the raw material for the kind of thinking they're going to be able to do. And a lot of that's unconscious. So if you can kind of take care of that stuff for people and just make sure just the environment is optimal, then sometimes there's not much more you need to do apart from just make sure that like the soil is fertile. If you create a fertile, healthy, rich environment, then all you need to do is trust people to be awesome in it. So that's kind of where my passion for that stuff comes from.
Yeah, trust is such a big element in all of this, especially when people are working remotely. And I think that was most people's fears, right? Was they just going to sit at home and watch Netflix all day? Yeah. How do we make sure they don't do that?
Yeah, that's so true.
No.
Yeah.
Have you guys, I mean, how, what would you say to someone that's maybe struggling with that? Maybe they feel their team's doing that. Jay, have you ever encountered that with a manager?
I haven't encountered it with a manager, but I tend to like ask the question, like, you've hired a person to do a job, so you should trust them to do that job. And I ultimately tend to believe that most people want to do the best job that they can. And until they prove to you that they're not doing their job, like, you should trust them. And I'm obviously not saying like if somebody is not doing their work for X amount of time and watching Netflix, that you should just let that go. But if somebody is producing work, but you can't see them working, like, they must be working if their work is getting done. So
it's something. So in my company also, one of the teams is very big on tracking time, but funny enough, today they came out and said, this is not going to be a thing anymore. So I was like, yes, but things should be more outcome based, so it's not really output, like, because anyone can just say, oh, hey, I worked for 5 hours on this task, but the outcome is what it needs to come down to. And that's what I like about, being that facilitator online is setting that compass, setting those goals so that everyone understands the outcomes that they want to achieve together as a team.
What you're speaking to there also is something I think in a remote environment, we need to remember that the more you distribute control, the better it'll function as well. So you're speaking about like goals, and a team can also self-manage. And I think it's almost not possible to get the right kind of feedback back up to management at all levels for them to have control. It's just a myth, actually, that they'll ever have that kind of control. So rather accepting that you don't have that kind of control, but how can you distribute it and make sure all the other feedback loops are healthy? Because ultimately a team knows how everyone's doing, and are they equipped with feedback skills? Do they know how to have those kind of hard conversations? Is there clear escalation paths if they need it? So that you don't have to control, you can rather just monitor feedback loops.
Yeah, one of the things I struggled with, and I'm going to ask for advice on this, but I feel like I'm in a much better space, was in the beginning. Everyone was having conversations on Slack, and I felt like I'd lost my finger on the pulse that I had when everyone was around. But I quickly realized that that wasn't a problem. But if someone was struggling with that, what advice would you give them? Especially for product owners out there, because they need to understand what's happening and what. Any advice for someone that might be struggling with that?
I've kind of found over time that the important stuff has a way of surfacing itself back to you. So if you miss something and it's urgent, someone will contact you, or it's critical or whatever, it has its way of coming back. And it's almost kind of the wisdom of backlogs, that those cards in there that someone wrote and no one really cares about, they subtly die out. And that's okay. There's some information which is just noise in our system, and it's okay to let it fade out. So kind of just trusting that a bit. And the other thing that I think is also important to acknowledge, I think it's okay for product owners to have check-ins or syncs with people or smaller groups of people, like not feeling guilty for doing that. So one of the teams I work on, the product owner is very human-centric, and he needs to connect with people and needs to hear where they are. And at first, that pattern from the outside might look like he is funneling work on an individual basis and kind of disconnecting the team, but it's actually not the dynamic at play. He just syncs in with individuals at different points in time, and it's kind of his way of also keeping a pulse check for himself. And I think that's fine. I'm hesitant to judge that.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely it's important. And again, from a Scrum Master's point of view, to make sure that they're doing those touching base with their teams and the individual people on the side. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We can slowly wrap up. And I wanted to know, I know that you guys obviously know, and I've become a lot more, I feel a lot more stronger over time, especially during lockdown and all of this, the importance of a facilitator in this. And you also mentioned that there's a role that's a dedicated head of remote. What advice would you give to business owners or companies that they don't realize they have this problem? How would you tell them, what is the benefits of having someone that's skilled in facilitation in a remote setting? Sure.
So something that I think we speak about is we don't want to sell meetings, right? There are many ways for people to come together. We're not trying to make the case that you should have more meetings. At the same time, meetings are unavoidable for an organization. Even your most asynchronous, fully remote companies, GitLabs of the world, etc., are having meetings. And meetings, the companies are made up of all these small interactions. There's lots of small ones and they compound, and meetings are one of those pieces. And if your meetings are ineffective, like if one voice is dominating and outcomes are skewed, or if kind of weird cultures emerge there, those spread. Like there's this ripple effect throughout your organization. And so we really believe that you cannot afford to have low quality meetings. The impact on your organization cannot actually be overstated. Meetings are these small little things we don't think about, but they're the building blocks, or one of the core building blocks. And so there's plenty of research to show that meetings and collaboration are the biggest impacted areas in remote working. And at the same time, we can see that meetings really matter. So it's pretty much just the cost you're willing to pay, I guess. If you can handle the status quo, that's fine. But we personally,
yeah, but I mean, what you guys provide is helping people to facilitate all of those things happening. So prioritizing work, understanding, you know, where people are drowning, when they're drowning, and how they're drowning. I mean, I think a lot of people are suffering and they don't have a voice. They don't have that that ability to say, okay, but hold on, maybe we should change the way we're doing things. They're too scared to talk. And so that for me is one of the biggest things a facilitator should roll, is pick up these trends and then improve the processes within your meetings and I guess your whole remote facilitation, your whole remote way of working now. That's sort of my input on that.
Yeah. And Jay, I'm sure you've also got a
I was just going to say, I think sometimes the struggle is that a lot of what we do is sometimes so, it can seem unseen. So it's like the way we hold the space or get to help a team get to outcomes or facilitation, sometimes it can be perceived as like, you know, just magical fairies working in the background. And I think that's why it can be sometimes so hard to justify having that role in place. But I can definitely see the value of having facilitation as a skill, not even if it's a role, just a skill. Just because something simple that happened once in a meeting was I introduced this action table, which we have in our book, of like simply just visualizing like what is the outcome, who's doing this, and by what date. And we speak about this in the book because sometimes people leave with different ideas of who is doing what, and just visualizing this or just saying like this is what we agreed to. It seems like such a simple thing, but sometimes people just don't do that. And that's like just one small example of like facilitation skills that just go unnoticed, I guess. They can be quite valuable.
No, very valuable. Gosh. So last question for both of you. Same question. You guys have 6 principles. Am I right? In your book?
Good job.
You are mentors. What principle do you like teaching or feel like is the most important principle to teach a new Scrum Master or facilitator? Jay, you can start us off.
For me, it's always going to be create equal opportunity. And I think it's just because if you're thinking about what does create equal opportunity mean to an individual, it doesn't matter so much what the practical advice that we give in the book. It will help you think about how can I create the same experience for each person in this meeting. How can I make sure that everybody is able to engage in the way that's most comfortable for them, and also make it easy for them to participate? Definitely my favorite.
I'd say that's principle number 1 for a reason, because it's kind of the cornerstone. If you don't have equal opportunity, everything else falls apart. But ones that I also like, I'm debating between 2, but I think a practical one is guide with visuals. So a lot of the time we find ourselves on remote calls where we just get like whiplash, being pulled into this verbal conversation that just goes, you know, and everyone's trying to remember it. And again, some of the neuro stuff, you can only remember this teeny tiny bit in real time. And so it's kind of got a fatigue aspect to it. It's definitely got a inclusion aspect to it, because most remote teams have different language speakers on the call. And if you've only got a verbal record of the conversation, you're leaving people behind. If people drop off, one of the biggest symptoms in remote calls is audio dropping. Then they've got no other way of coming back in apart from interrupting everyone, which is frustrating. So the simplest thing you can start with is a blank document where you're just going to write down what's happening real time, and it can go a long way. So guide with visuals would be second.
Yeah. And it also talks to one of my previous questions about keeping people engaged. Those 2 principles will definitely help for that.
Definitely.
Okay. Well, ladies, I'm going to cap it there. Thank you so much. And for everyone watching, please go get the book. You guys want to tell where people can find the book? Let the viewers and the listeners know where they can get the book.
Thank you. Well, firstly, thank you so much for having us. I can speak for both of us. I think that we really enjoyed this. Yeah, Jay's giving the thumbs up. This is awesome. And yeah, you can get it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or our publisher's store, BK Publisher. And
Take-A-Lot now.
Oh,
Sorry.
nice.
Yes. It is
Shadi
now.
Adi. Take-A-Lot.
Exactly. But yeah, thank you for the shout out for the book.
Yeah, no, it's great. And it's so wonderful to have local South Africans, pushing boundaries in the Agile community. I see you doing international conferences and talks, so keep up the great work. And thank you for finding time to join me in my project.
Of course, and good luck with it too.
Thank you very much.
Cool.
Thanks very much, ladies.
Do we now do a play bye and then a real bye?
I might just put this all in.
Feel free.